I'm thrilled to say it is absolutely working. It just took a little bit of a learning curve to figure out how to reconstitute it in a way that we like it. Hey guys, this is Megan from You Go to Be Kidding, and this week we are giving another update on our freeze dryer. A few months back we did a 1-year freeze dryer review, and so if you haven't seen that video, I'll make sure to link it above, check it out. But I wanted to give an update because we had been freeze drying some of our milk from our goats all year, and I had been really working to try to freeze dry an actual meal, and I finally pulled that off too. So I wanted to share in this video how that's been working, how have we actually been able to use the milk, whether that's been going well or not, and to talk about using the chili. That's been going great. So I wanted to just give this update and share some practical applications for our freeze dryer, the things we're actually using and how it's working out for us. And so that's what we're going to talk about this week. So first things first, one of the biggest reasons we wanted to get this freeze dryer was for milk. We have mini La Mancha dairy goats, and so they don't breed all year round. We only end up with milk during the summer, and so we are all dried up right now. It is January, it's cold, and we've been buying our weekly milk from a local farmer, and that's awesome. I am thankful for that resource, but we were really hoping that the freeze dryer would let us save some of our milk from the spring and summers when we're overrun with milk, and to use it over the winter. And so I wanted to share how that's been going. We weren't able to freeze dry as much as I would have hoped. We really struggled. The dog is barking. We really struggled with some taste and mineral issues that we got worked out this summer. And honestly, we just struggled with some diligence issues. Some of it was just getting used to the freeze dryer, but we didn't get nearly as many batches in the freeze dryer as we should have. And so we don't have a ton, but we do have some, and we've been slowly using through that. The first couple of batches that we tried to rehydrate of our freeze-dried milk didn't go so well. We just used not cold water, but water out of our Berkey, which I feel actually is a little bit cold, or maybe we just keep our house really cold. But we just used water straight out of the Berkey and put it in a 1/2-gallon mason jar, mixed it together, and it just wasn't dissolving. Like, it had almost a powdered texture, kind of like you would expect from a protein shake or something like that. And I have texture issues. I don't actually like powdered things that don't dissolve. That's not my jam. My husband is a saint. He'll try anything, and he was willing to sacrifice and use some of that milk in his coffee. The taste was fine, but it just held that powdered consistency, and so then the fat also didn't kind of mix back in. Now, goat's milk is naturally homogenized, which means that the cream does not separate out like it does on a cow's milk, and so that's all in the freeze dryer. And so there were some, it just wasn't reconstituting correctly. It was clumpy. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it wasn't working well. So Damien was able to use that in his coffee, and it didn't bother him too much. And we were able to use it in baking and cooking and things, and that was no problem at all. And then our second issue, as we continued to work through it, is that some of our freeze-dried milk tasted like jalapenos. And I have a video about when I originally freeze-dried some of the milk, and that's our fault. I can't remember if I'm pretty sure I freeze-dried some jalapenos in the same batch that I did some milk, which in hindsight seems obvious that those flavors are going to mix, but I wasn't sure, and honestly, I'm glad to have tried it out, and now I know. So not only do you have to freeze the trays with milk, so we put the tray in our freezer and then pour the milk in it while it's sitting there. We let it freeze, and then that's how I was able to just do a little bit from each day's milking. And so I just add trays as I did it, and then when they got full, I stuck them in the freeze dryer. And I believe I had a batch of jalapenos in there as well that needed to get processed, and so they were just in a tray frozen in the freezer. So not only did they spend time in the freezer together, which I know that can blend flavors, but then they ran through the freeze dryer cycle together. So we have a whole batch of milk that definitely tastes like jalapeno. That my husband definitely tried, but he did not does not drink that in his coffee. But we were able to use that for some other things, and I think we even donated some of that batch to the dog. but I can use that in baking. So if I want to mix things, I don't know, cornbread with jalapeno would be awesome. So I definitely can use it. I'm definitely going to have to get a little more creative with that. But otherwise, we did still have some other non-jalapeno tainted milk. And so we got to work trying to figure out how to make the consistency better, because we know that the freeze-dried foods should come back together without that powdered texture. So I think it was the homesteading family that mentioned, probably in my book or even on her own homestead or YouTube videos, she mentioned she has mentioned using warm water for things. I don't know if she mentioned it for milk. I should look. But we tried using slightly warmer water. So we warmed up our water just a little bit before we mixed it in with the milk powder, and that helped a ton. The texture was almost perfect. It worked way better. It no longer had that powdered texture. It actually all reconstituted and went back together, and then we just had to wait a little bit while it was in the fridge and warming back up. And so the only issue with it then was that the goat's milk, the fat kind of did separate out. Now, it wasn't clumpy like before, but it was not quite mixed all the way together. And so I know it was Carolyn Thomas from the homesteading family that I learned to blend it some. And so we used an immersion blender and stuck it in there, and we're able to just mix it up just slightly. You don't want whipped cream. But we were able to mix it up, and that helped. And so really it is working. The kids are good with it on cereal or the few things that they drink it on. Damien's been using it in his coffee. I have not quite used it in my coffee. Again, textures are super hard for me, so I need to get better about that, and I am trying. And I think it's actually fine. It's just kind of one of those mental blocks that's on me. But Damien has been using it for sure, and the kids, we've been using it in smoothies and stuff with absolutely no trouble at all. The kids have been loving having the milk for smoothies. I use it in some baking and cooking I do, and so it's been a nice way to have our goat's milk. And our goal for next year is absolutely to make sure that we do more. I'm really encouraged. At first, when we started reconstituting our milk, I was concerned that it just wouldn't be any good and that we'd kind of wasted our effort and potentially even just had a machine for this one purpose and it wasn't going to work out for that. So I'm thrilled to say, like, it is absolutely working. It just took a little bit of a learning curve to figure out how to reconstitute it in a way that we like it. But it is going well, and I'm excited for next year to make sure that we have more on hand. We unfortunately don't have much, so we only have a few kind of batches of it left. We will run out of the goat's milk we have saved well before our goats go back into milk. But that's okay. That's part of the process. It's more than we had last year on hand because we didn't have any milk to freeze dry last year. So overall, I'd say the milk was a success. It just took some sticking with it and figuring out the kinks. And there's nothing I can do about the jalapeno milk, but next year I will make sure that I don't do that. So yeah, that's the milk saga. It has definitely been worth it, but it did take us some time to figure it out. The last thing we wanted to work on with the freeze dryer was doing a whole meal and having fast food options. And I had talked about doing chili, and I did it. I was able to freeze dry a little bit of leftovers one time when we did a batch of chili, and then we reconstituted it. It's funny, looking at this powdered stuff, this powdered chili in a jar, doesn't necessarily look very appetizing. And the night we needed to eat it, Damien and I just kind of looked at each other and said, are we really gonna do it? And we laughed at each other, but we did it, and actually it turned out awesome. So I had stored it in a 1/2-gallon mason jar. I heated up, I just used my electric kettle to boil some water and poured it in the jar. And so it started reconstituting, and then that actually was not enough for our meal, and I hadn't loved the flavor of that chili, and so I just poured it in a saucepan after, I think I waited about 10 to 15 minutes of it just sitting in the boiling water in the mason jar, and then I poured all of its contents in a pot on the stove. I added some beans and some tomatoes and added a whole bunch of seasoning, and it came out as if it was fresh. It was awesome. It was super easy to do. If I hadn't had to modify the flavor or add more contents, because again, since it was leftovers, it was not enough for a whole meal for our family, but I was able to add to it super easily. It tasted great. The texture on everything was perfect. The beans were all good. The meat was good. I was super impressed with how it went. I was scared to take that first bite, but honestly, I don't think that you could have told. If I had served it to you and not told you that it was freeze-dried, there is no way you would have been able to figure that out. So I did go ahead and mix up a big batch of chili. I made a whole big pot. I used my big giant 3-gallon cheese pot and made a bunch of chili and was able to freeze dry 3 full trays, like heaping trays of chili. Let's see, I had an 8-quart bowl that was pretty much full of chili, and it filled up 3 trays, heaping, but obviously not overflowing. And I was able to then process that and put that into 3 separate half-gallon jars. That is definitely more per jar than I had last time. I think it will be enough for a whole meal. And I obviously could use a Mylar bag to store those if I wanted to not take up so much space or use the jars. But, and then if I use a Mylar bag, I could always pour it in a jar when it's time to reconstitute it. But I am really excited. The chili turned out way better than I was imagining it would. And I am excited for the ability to do meals like this. We definitely struggle with, wanting to go eat out or grab pizza or whatever. So I am thrilled for this option, and I think it's going to work out great. So thanks for watching, guys. I just wanted to give you a practical update on our freeze dryer. We are using it, not only getting things processed, but also using the foods we process. And that's, I think, a double-edged sword of a freeze dryer. Not only do you have to actually be committed to run the machine and get things in it, but then you have to be willing to use the foods that come out of it. So you have to like them. And there's a learning curve to that. Some foods go in and come out and they're not good. For some reason, we did a batch of grapes and they were not good on the back end. And that's okay. So we're learning the foods we like and the ones we don't, kind of fruits and things for snacks. And we're learning things like chili, able to use it for a full meal and have that option available. And we're working out the kinks with the milk as well. So thanks for watching, guys. We hope this is helpful, and we'll see you next week.